The crystal chandelier caught the afternoon light just right, casting tiny rainbows across Eleanor Whitmore's pale hands as she stroked Princess's silver fur. I was dusting the mahogany bookshelf in the East Wing library when I heard her whisper those words that would change everything. "You know, my darling, I think you deserve half of everything I have." I froze, my cleaning cloth suspended mid-air above a leather-bound first edition of Pride and Prejudice. Princess Eleanor's pristine Persian cat, with fur like spun moonlight, purred contentedly in her lap, oblivious to the bombshell her owner had just dropped. Eleanor often talked to Princess most wealthy widows develop quirky habits after decades of isolation in mansions too large for one person, but this felt different, deliberate, final. The late September sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust particles that danced like golden snow around Eleanor's frail figure. At 92, she still possessed the sharp intelligence that had helped her late husband build Whitmore Industries into a textile empire. That same intelligence now glinted in her pale blue eyes as she continued her one-sided conversation with Princess. "Marcus thinks you're just a spoiled pet," Eleanor murmured, her voice carrying the particular tone she used when making important decisions. Crisp, calculated. He has no idea what real loyalty looks like, does he? "Maria dear, would you bring me some tea?" Eleanor's request floated across the room like silk over steel. "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore." I set down my supplies carefully on the Persian rug that cost more than most people's cars and headed toward the kitchen, my mind racing with possibilities. In the 3 years I'd worked as Eleanor's live-in housekeeper, I'd learned to read the subtle shifts in her demeanor like a meteorologist reads storm clouds. The way she held her shoulders when her nephew Marcus called rigid with barely concealed irritation. The tightness around her eyes when her lawyer visited, focused and calculating. The satisfied smile that appeared when she'd made a decision that would definitely irritate someone important. This smile was different. This was pure, undiluted victory. The Whitmore kitchen was a monument to old-money custom cabinetry, marble countertops, and a cast-iron stove that had been converted to modern gas burners but maintained its Victorian charm. I prepared Eleanor's Earl Grey exactly how she preferred it, 2 lumps of sugar, a splash of heavy cream, served in her favourite Royal Crown Derby teacup with the delicate rose pattern that had been her wedding china 67 years ago. While the tea steeped, I processed what I'd overheard. Eleanor was worth approximately $12 million, according to the whispered conversations I'd accidentally intercepted between Marcus and his wife Jennifer during their weekly Sunday visits. They thought I couldn't understand their English perfectly, a mistake that had proven quite illuminating over the past 3 years. Marcus Whitmore had been circling his aunt's fortune like a well-dressed vulture ever since his uncle died 5 years ago. But lately, something had changed in his desperation. I'd noticed the signs during recent visits, the way his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was watching, the dark circles under his eyes that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide, the phone calls he'd step outside to take with hushed, urgent tones. "That cat eats better than children in third world countries," he'd complained just last Sunday, watching Eleanor hand-feed Princess imported Scottish salmon from a sterling silver dish. But this time, instead of his usual entitled irritation, I'd heard something that chilled me genuine desperation. "This obsession with an animal isn't healthy, Aunt Eleanor. People will start to question your judgment, and frankly, we need to discuss some urgent family matters." Eleanor had simply smiled her mysterious smile and continued spoiling her beloved companion. But I'd seen something flicker in her eyes. Something that suggested Marcus's words had been noted, filed away, and would eventually be answered in a way he wouldn't appreciate. Now, carrying the tea tray back through the mansion's hallways lined with oil paintings of stern-faced Whitmore ancestors, I realized that something was building toward a confrontation that would test everything I'd come to value about this strange, privileged world I'd been welcomed into. "Sit with me, Maria," Eleanor said as I set the tray down on the antique coffee table. "I want to discuss something important, and I value your opinion." I perched on the edge of the velvet wingback chair across from her, hands folded properly in my lap. Eleanor maintained old-fashioned ideas about employer-employee boundaries, but 3 years of caring for someone in their most vulnerable moments creates its own intimacy. I'd held her hand through panic attacks when the house felt too empty. I'd sat beside her bed when pneumonia nearly claimed her last winter. I'd been the one to catch her when she fainted at her husband's grave on their anniversary. "I've made a decision about my estate," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her words. "Princess will inherit exactly half of everything I own. The house, the investments, the art collection, the jewelry, all of it." My breath caught in my throat like a butterfly trapped in amber. "Mrs. Whitmore, that's a very substantial inheritance. $12.3 million is what my accountant calculated last month." She sipped her tea with the same delicacy she brought to every aspect of her refined life. "Princess has given me more genuine joy and unwavering loyalty than any human member of my family. She deserves to be protected long after I'm gone." I glanced at Princess, who was now investigating a dust mote with the intense focus only cats possess when something captures their hunting instincts. Her silver fur gleamed in the afternoon light, and her green eyes held that mysterious intelligence that made you believe she understood far more than she let on. She had no idea she was about to become one of the wealthiest animals in Connecticut. "What about Marcus?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, though we both knew it needed to be asked. Eleanor's teacup clinked against its saucer with the faintest sound, like a small bell tolling. "Marcus will receive his fair share, half of what remains after Princess's inheritance and various charitable donations. But he spent the past 5 years trying to convince me I'm too old, too sentimental, too foolish to manage my own affairs. Perhaps he'll learn that underestimating elderly women can be quite expensive." The doorbell's deep, resonant chimes echoed through the mansion, bouncing off marble floors and mahogany walls. Eleanor checked the antique grandfather clock that had stood in the corner since before the Civil War. "That'll be Mr. Patterson. Perfect timing." I rose to answer the door, but Eleanor's voice stopped me with the gentle authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Maria, I need you to witness the will signing. In these past 3 years, you've been more family to me than most of my actual blood relatives." The weight of her words settled around me like a warm shawl on a cold morning. I'd come to this job 3 years ago, desperate and broken, recently divorced, no children, struggling to rebuild my life at 45 after my ex-husband had emptied our bank accounts and disappeared with his secretary. Eleanor had seen past my imperfect English and trembling hands to hire me when nobody else would even grant me an interview. She'd become more than an employer. She'd become the mother figure I'd lost when I immigrated from Guatemala 20 years ago with nothing but dreams and determination. I opened the heavy oak front door to admit Mr. Patterson, Eleanor's elderly lawyer, who carried himself with the dignified bearing of someone who'd spent decades handling the affairs of Connecticut's oldest families. His expression suggested appropriate solemnity for someone about to help a client leave millions of dollars to a cat, a scenario that even his extensive legal experience hadn't quite prepared him for. "Eleanor, I must advise you one final time," Patterson said as he arranged his papers on Eleanor's antique writing desk, his voice carrying the careful tone lawyers use when they know their client is about to do something spectacularly controversial. "This will is certain to be contested. Marcus has been your presumptive heir for years. Let him contest it." Eleanor's signature was surprisingly steady for her age, each letter formed with the precision of someone who'd signed important documents throughout a long, successful marriage. "I am of completely sound mind, properly witnessed by my trusted housekeeper, and Princess deserves every single penny." As I signed my name as witness, watching the ink flow across the legal document that would forever change the Whitmore family dynamics, I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sunshine streaming through the windows. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. Something in Marcus's recent behavior had shifted from entitled expectation to dangerous desperation, and I suspected Princess was about to become the target of more than just legal challenges. Patterson gathered his papers with the efficient movements of someone eager to escape before the inevitable family explosion. "I'll file this immediately," he promised Eleanor, "and I'll ensure several copies are stored in different locations." After the lawyer left, Eleanor retired for her customary afternoon nap, Princess curled contentedly beside her on the silk bedspread like a small, purring cloud. I tried to return to my cleaning duties, but concentration proved impossible. Something about Marcus's recent visits kept nagging at me, not just his increased desperation, but specific details I'd been too polite to acknowledge. The tremor in his hands, the way he'd started asking detailed questions about Princess's eating schedule, his sudden interest in which rooms she preferred, which doors she used to go outside. Most disturbing of all, his phone conversations with someone about liquid assets and emergency solutions that couldn't wait much longer. Around 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed with an incoming text message. The caller ID made my stomach drop. Marcus Whitmore, coming by tonight instead of Sunday. Need to discuss Aunt Eleanor's care situation with you. Important matters to resolve. I stared at the screen, reading the message 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. Marcus never visited on weekday evenings. His routine was as predictable as clockwork. Sunday afternoons at 2 o'clock sharp, bearing flowers and false concern in equal measure. He certainly never wanted to discuss anything with the household staff, whom he generally treated as invisible fixtures. I quickly typed back, "Mrs. Whitmore is resting after medical appointments. Perhaps Sunday would be more convenient for discussions." His response arrived within seconds, the speed suggesting he'd been waiting by his phone. "Tonight, 7 p.m. sharp. And Maria, don't mention this visit to Eleanor beforehand. I want to surprise her." I stared at that last sentence until the words seemed to swim before my eyes. Don't mention this to Eleanor. In 3 years of employment, Marcus had never asked me to keep secrets from his aunt. The request felt like a threat wrapped in politeness, a warning disguised as casual instruction. But this time, instead of my usual deference to family authority, something inside me rebelled. The years of watching Eleanor treat me with kindness and respect while her own nephew circled her fortune like a predator had changed me. I wasn't just the hired help anymore. I was Princess's protector and Eleanor's friend. I climbed the curved staircase to Eleanor's bedroom, my mind already forming a plan. I found her propped against silk pillows, Princess stretched across her lap while she read a leather-bound mystery novel through her delicate reading glasses. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. Marcus texted, "He's coming by tonight instead of waiting for Sunday. He specifically requested that I not tell you about the visit beforehand." Eleanor looked up sharply. Her book forgotten. "Did he indeed? I thought you should know immediately. But more than that, I think we need to be very careful tonight." I sat on the edge of the bed, my voice dropping to urgent tones. "I've been watching Marcus lately, really watching him. His behavior has changed dramatically in the past month." "How so?" I described the trembling hands, the desperate phone calls, his sudden, detailed interest in Princess's routines. Eleanor listened with growing alarm, her hand stilling on Princess's fur. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think Marcus might be planning to hurt Princess. Tonight." Eleanor's weathered hand stilled completely. "You think he would, actually?" "I think he's desperate enough to try anything, and I think we need to be ready for him." Before Eleanor could respond, the doorbell's deep chimes resonated through the house. 2 hours early. Princess's head shot up immediately, her ears flattening against her skull in that distinctive way cats display when they sense approaching danger. "Maria." Eleanor's voice was very quiet, carrying a new tension I'd never heard before. "What do you propose we do?" For the first time since I'd started working here, I realized Eleanor was looking to me for answers, not just following my suggestion, but trusting me to protect what mattered most to both of us. "We're going to catch him in the act," I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. "But first, we need to get Princess somewhere safe." Marcus stood on the doorstep with his usual politician smile, but everything about him screamed desperation. His expensive suit was wrinkled and damp with sweat despite the cool evening. His hair, normally perfect, showed traces of nervous fingers running through it repeatedly. Most telling of all, his eyes held the wild gleam of someone whose world was collapsing around him. "Maria, good to see you." His voice carried forced cheerfulness that fooled no one. "Is Aunt Eleanor available?" I brought her something special. The white pharmacy bag in his hands made my blood run cold. Not cookies from Bentley's bakery, as he'd claimed in his text, a pharmacy bag with what looked like prescription bottles inside. "Mrs. Whitmore is resting," I said, not moving from the doorway. "Perhaps you could visit on Sunday as usual." "This can't wait." The mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something desperate and dangerous underneath. "My daughter. Sarah's treatment can't be delayed any longer. The experimental therapy costs $40,000 and insurance won't cover it. I need Aunt Eleanor to understand that family emergencies require immediate action. The mention of his sick daughter hit me like a physical blow. Sarah was only 8 years old, battling a rare form of leukemia that had been headline news in the local papers when Marcus had organized fundraising events for her treatment. Suddenly, his desperation took on a different, more terrifying dimension. Not greed, but a father's love twisted into something monstrous. Eleanor appeared at the top of the grand staircase, Princess conspicuously absent from her arms. "Marcus, dear! How unexpected!" He looked up at his aunt, and I watched his expression shift through several emotions: surprise, guilt, determination, and finally a cold resolve that made my stomach clench. "Aunt Eleanor, I need to talk to you about Sarah, about the treatment she needs." His voice cracked slightly. "I know the timing isn't ideal, but we're running out of options." "Of course, dear. Come in." Eleanor descended the stairs carefully, her face showing nothing but grandmotherly concern. "Tell me what's happening with Sarah." Marcus stepped inside without being invited, his eyes scanning the room like he was memorizing it. "The doctors say we have maybe 2 weeks before the window for this treatment closes. But the cost. I've already mortgaged everything, liquidated all our investments. I need $40,000, and I need it now." "Marcus, you know I'd do anything to help Sarah." "Then change your will." The words exploded out of him like a dam bursting. "Cancel this insanity about leaving money to a cat and give me my inheritance now. Sarah's life depends on it." Eleanor settled into her favorite chair, her movements deliberate and calm. "Marcus, we can certainly discuss helping with Sarah's medical expenses. But surely you're not suggesting I should mortgage Princess's future?" "Princess's future?" Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. "Aunt Eleanor, Princess is a cat. Sarah is my daughter. She's dying." The raw anguish in his voice made my heart twist, even as I recognized the manipulation behind it. This was worse than simple greed. This was a desperate father weaponizing his child's suffering to justify the unthinkable. "I understand your desperation, Marcus, but—" "No, you don't understand." He pulled one of the prescription bottles from the bag, shaking it like a rattle. "These are Sarah's pain medications. She's in agony every day, and the doctors say without this treatment, she has maybe 6 months left." Eleanor's face went pale. "Marcus, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to be practical." Marcus's voice took on a persuasive tone, though his hands continued to shake. "Princess is old. Cats her age often develop sudden health problems, kidney failure, liver disease, heart conditions. It would be a mercy to let her go peacefully before she suffers." "Princess is perfectly healthy," Eleanor said firmly, though I could hear the tremor in her voice. "For now, but these things can change very quickly." Marcus opened the prescription bottle, shaking out several small white pills. "These are for Sarah's nausea, but they have a funny side effect. They're extremely toxic to cats. Just 1 pill dissolved in water would. Well, Princess would just fall asleep and never wake up. No pain, no suffering." The casual way he discussed murdering Princess, while justifying it as a mercy, sent ice through my veins. But it was the tortured logic behind it that made him truly dangerous. He'd convinced himself that killing an innocent animal to save his dying child was not just acceptable, but necessary. "Marcus," Eleanor's voice was steady despite the horror of what she was hearing. "You're talking about murdering Princess." "I'm talking about saving Sarah's life." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the window where Princess often sat in the sunshine. "One small life against another. It's not even a choice." That's when I realized Eleanor and I had made a critical error. We'd assumed Marcus would try to poison Princess secretly, but his desperation had driven him beyond stealth. He was planning to force the issue tonight, in front of us, and dare us to stop him from saving his daughter. "Where is Princess?" Marcus asked suddenly, his eyes darting around the room. "She's usually glued to your side by now." Eleanor and I exchanged glances. Princess was safely hidden in the wine cellar, 2 floors below, with food, water, and a litter box. But Marcus was too agitated to be put off much longer. "She's sleeping in my room," Eleanor said carefully. The excitement of having visitors sometimes overwhelms her. "Perfect." Marcus's smile was terrible to witness the expression of a loving father who decided that murdering a pet was an acceptable price for his child's life. "Why don't we go wake her up? I brought something special for her." He held up the prescription bottle again, shaking it meaningfully. 3 small white pills that would end Princess's life to fund Sarah's treatment. The logic was monstrous, but I could see how a desperate parent might convince himself it made perfect sense. "Marcus," I said, stepping between him and the staircase. "You don't want to do this." "Don't I?" He looked at me with eyes that held no recognition of my humanity, just an obstacle between him and his daughter's salvation. "Maria, you don't have children. You can't possibly understand what it's like to watch your child suffer and know you have the power to save her. Killing Princess won't save Sarah. Getting my inheritance will. And if Princess dies naturally from complications related to her advanced age, Aunt Eleanor will surely see the wisdom of updating her will to benefit the living rather than the dead." The twisted logic was complete in his mind. Princess's death would shock Eleanor into changing her will, providing immediate access to the money Sarah needed. It wasn't murder in Marcus's fractured reasoning, it was triage, choosing which life mattered more. "Let's go get Princess," Marcus said, moving toward the stairs with determined strides. "I promise this will be quick and painless, much more humane than watching her deteriorate slowly from kidney disease or cancer." I moved to block his path, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Marcus, stop, please. There has to be another way to help Sarah." "There is no other way." His voice cracked with genuine anguish. "Do you think I want to do this? Do you think I haven't explored every other option? I've begged banks for loans, started crowdfunding campaigns, sold everything I own. My daughter is dying, and this is the only solution left." Eleanor rose from her chair, her movement drawing both our attention. "Marcus, if you truly believe Princess needs to die for Sarah to live, then you'll have to kill her in front of me. I won't let you take her upstairs and hurt her in secret." Marcus stared at his aunt, clearly not expecting this response. "Aunt Eleanor, get Princess Maria." Eleanor's voice carried absolute authority. "Bring her here. If Marcus is determined to do this terrible thing, he can do it where I can see what kind of man my nephew has become." I understood Eleanor's strategy immediately. Marcus might be desperate enough to poison a cat in private, but forcing him to commit murder in front of his elderly aunt, a woman he'd claimed to love, would test whether his desperation could overcome his remaining humanity. "Maria, don't." Marcus started, but I was already moving. I retrieved Princess from her hiding place in the wine cellar, my hands shaking as I carried her back to the sitting room. She purred softly against my chest, trusting and innocent, having no idea that her life hung in the balance of a desperate father's impossible choice. When I entered the room with Princess in my arms, Marcus's face crumpled. The abstract idea of letting Princess go peacefully had just become the concrete reality of murdering a purring, trusting animal who was looking at him with curious green eyes. "She recognizes you," Eleanor said quietly, watching Marcus struggle with what he'd planned to do. "She's always liked you, Marcus. Even when you complained about her, she'd still come to you for attention during your visits." Princess, as if summoned by Eleanor's words, began trying to climb toward Marcus from my arms. Her small paws reached out, and she made the soft trilling sound she used when greeting someone she was happy to see. Marcus backed away as if Princess were on fire. "No, I can't. She shouldn't." His voice broke completely. "Sarah needs me to be strong. She needs me to do whatever it takes." "Then do it," Eleanor said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "Take Princess from Maria, crush those pills and pour them down her throat. Show me how much you love Sarah." The challenge hung in the air between us. Marcus looked at Princess, still purring and reaching toward him with innocent trust, then at the prescription bottle in his trembling hand, then at Eleanor's implacable gaze. "I can't," he whispered, the pills falling from nerveless fingers to scatter across Eleanor's Persian rug. "God help me, I can't kill her, even for Sarah." The confession broke something inside him. Marcus collapsed onto Eleanor's sofa, his face buried in his hands, sobbing with the raw grief of a father who'd reached the end of his resources and couldn't take the final step toward monstrosity. "I'm going to lose her," he wept. "Sarah's going to die because I'm too weak to do what needs to be done." Eleanor moved slowly to sit beside her nephew, her arthritic hand gently touching his shoulder. "Marcus, why didn't you simply ask me for help with Sarah's medical bills?" He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Because you made it clear that Princess was more important to you than family. $40,000 is nothing to you, but you wouldn't even consider giving it to save your great-niece's life if it meant admitting Princess didn't deserve to inherit millions." "You never asked," Eleanor said quietly. "You assumed, you plotted, you planned to commit murder, but you never once simply asked me to help save Sarah's life." The truth of her words seemed to hit Marcus like a physical blow. In his desperation and wounded pride, he'd never considered the direct approach. He'd been so focused on the inheritance, on his sense of entitlement, that he'd never thought to appeal to Eleanor's better nature on Sarah's behalf. "Would you have helped?" he asked, his voice small and broken. Eleanor looked at Princess, still purring contentedly in my arms, then back at Marcus with an expression that held equal measures of love and disappointment. "Marcus, I've been waiting 3 years for someone in this family to care enough about Sarah to simply ask me to help. Of course I would have helped." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at his aunt, the full magnitude of his moral failure washing over him. He'd been so consumed with what he believed he deserved that he'd never considered what Sarah actually needed, which was an uncle wealthy enough to fund her treatment with a simple phone call. "The money's been sitting in a medical emergency fund I established when Sarah was first diagnosed," Eleanor continued. $40,000, exactly what you need. "I've been hoping someone would mention her treatment costs, but everyone seemed to assume I was too old and selfish to care about a sick child." Marcus looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "There's already money set aside for Sarah." "There has been for 2 years. I was simply waiting for her parents to be humble enough to accept help from a family they'd written off as eccentric and out of touch." The cruel irony was complete. Marcus had been prepared to commit murder to access money that was already designated for his daughter's care, money that would have been available the moment he'd swallowed his pride and asked for help. "I don't understand," Marcus whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eleanor's smile held profound sadness. "Because I wanted to see if anyone in this family could love Sarah enough to put her needs above their pride. Apparently, you loved her enough to consider murder, but not enough to risk appearing vulnerable." The weight of Eleanor's words seemed to crush what remained of Marcus's composure. He understood now that his daughter's life had never been in jeopardy because of Eleanor's will or Princess's inheritance. It had been endangered by his own stubborn refusal to admit he needed help. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Eleanor stood and walked to her writing desk, where she kept her checkbook. "Now, I write a check for Sarah's treatment. Then, we call Dr. Patterson to discuss setting up a proper medical trust fund for her ongoing care. And then you decide whether you can live with the man you almost became tonight." As Eleanor wrote out the check that would save his daughter's life, the check she'd apparently been waiting years to write, Marcus looked at Princess with something approaching awe. The cat he'd been prepared to murder had, through her very innocence, saved him from committing an act that would have destroyed his soul, even if it had saved Sarah's life. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Princess, though his words were meant for all of us. "I'm so sorry." Princess, with the forgiveness that only animals possess, began purring louder and reached out a small paw toward Marcus's face. Even after everything he'd planned to do to her, she offered comfort to a broken human who needed it. Eleanor handed Marcus the check, her expression carefully neutral. "The appointment with Sarah's doctors is Monday morning. Don't be late." Marcus stared at the check through tears. The number written there, representing not just his daughter's salvation, but the measure of his own moral failure. "Eleanor, Don't!" she interrupted gently. "Just take care of Sarah, that's all that matters now." After Marcus left clutching the check and muttering apologies that seemed directed as much at himself as at us, Eleanor and I sat in the quiet sitting room with Princess between us. The scattered pills from Marcus's prescription bottle lay on the Persian rug like tiny white accusations, evidence of how close we'd all come to an irreversible tragedy. "You knew he couldn't do it," I said finally. "You knew that forcing him to look at Princess while he tried to hurt her would break his resolve." Eleanor's smile was tired but satisfied. I gambled on there being enough decency left in him to prevent the unthinkable. If I'd been wrong. She didn't need to finish the sentence. "The money for Sarah, had you really been waiting for someone to ask?" "Every penny of it. I've been watching that family struggle with medical bills for 2 years, wondering why they were too proud to let me help." Eleanor reached down to stroke Princess's fur. "Pride is a expensive luxury when a child's life hangs in the balance." I looked at Princess, who was now grooming herself with typical feline composure, as if she hadn't just been at the center of a life-or-death moral crisis. "What do you think will happen to Marcus now?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, considering. "He'll save his daughter. He'll live with the knowledge of what he almost did. And maybe, if he's lucky, he'll become a better man because of it." The next morning brought news that Sarah's treatment had been approved and would begin immediately. Dr. Patterson called to confirm that Eleanor's medical trust fund had been established and would cover all of Sarah's ongoing care needs. But it also brought something unexpected, a visit from Jennifer, Marcus's ex-wife, who arrived at our door looking haggard and afraid. "I know what Marcus tried to do last night," she said without preamble when I opened the door. "He called me afterward, confessing everything. I came to apologize and to warn you." Eleanor invited Jennifer in, though Princess, with her newly sharpened instincts for danger, remained hidden under the sofa. "Warn us about what?" Eleanor asked. Jennifer's hands shook as she accepted the cup of tea I offered. "Marcus isn't the only one who's been watching your will situation. There are others in the family who know about Princess's inheritance, and they're not as conflicted about taking action as Marcus was." "Who specifically?" "Robert, primarily. Marcus's cousin. He's been organizing some of the other relatives, convincing them that your decision to leave money to Princess proves you're mentally incompetent." Jennifer's voice dropped to a whisper. "But after Marcus told him about the money you'd set aside for Sarah, money they never knew about, Robert realized that challenging your competency might not be enough." Eleanor's expression hardened. "What exactly is Robert planning?" "I don't know details, but Marcus heard him talking about permanent solutions and accidents that happen to old pets. Robert doesn't have a sick daughter to use as justification. His motivation is pure greed." The words hit me like ice water. We'd survived Marcus's desperate attempt to hurt Princess, only to learn that other family members might be planning something even worse. "Jennifer, why are you telling us this?" I asked. "Because Sarah loves Princess. During our visits here, she'd spend hours playing with her, and Princess always seemed to understand that Sarah was fragile and needed gentle treatment." Jennifer's voice cracked. "Marcus almost destroyed himself trying to save Sarah by hurting the one creature that brought her joy. I won't let Robert succeed where Marcus failed." Eleanor stood and walked to her writing desk, pulling out a business card. "Jennifer, I'm going to give you the number for my head of security. I think it's time Princess had some professional protection." As I listened to Eleanor make arrangements for bodyguards for a cat, a sentence I never thought I'd need to contemplate, I realized that the battle for Eleanor's inheritance was just beginning. Marcus's desperate attempt had been motivated by love, however twisted. What came next would be motivated by something much more dangerous. Pure, calculated greed. But this time, we were ready. And Princess, sleeping peacefully under the sofa after her traumatic night, had no idea that she was about to become the most heavily guarded cat in Connecticut. 3 days later, Robert made his move, but not in the way any of us expected. I was in the garden with Princess, both of us enjoying the warm October sunshine under the watchful eyes of the security team Eleanor had hired, when my phone rang. Eleanor's panicked voice came through the speaker, clear enough that even Princess's ears perked up in alarm. "Maria, someone's in the house. The upstairs alarm just triggered, but I can't see anyone from my room. Princess isn't with you, is she?" I looked down at the silver Persian cat, contentedly chasing a butterfly across the lawn. "She's right here with me, Mrs. Whitmore. We're both safe in the garden with security." "Thank God. I'm calling the police, but I need you to stay outside until..." The line went dead. My blood turned to ice as I stared at the silent phone. The security guards were already moving, speaking rapidly into their radios as they surrounded Princess and me with a protective circle. But Eleanor was alone in that house with whoever had triggered the alarm. "Get Princess to the car," I told the nearest guard, scooping up the cat and thrusting her into his arms. "Lock her in and keep her safe. I'm going to check on Mrs. Whitmore." "Ma'am, we can't let you. Eleanor is 92 years old and she's alone in there." My voice carried an authority I didn't know I possessed. "I'm not leaving her." I broke away from the security perimeter and ran toward the house, my heart hammering against my ribs. The front door stood slightly ajar, never a good sign in the Whitmore mansion, where every entrance was always carefully secured. I slipped inside, straining to hear any sound that might indicate where Eleanor was, or whether she was in immediate danger. The silence was more terrifying than any scream would have been. I found Eleanor in her bedroom, sitting calmly in her reading chair as if nothing unusual had happened. She looked up when I entered, her face showing relief, mixed with something that might have been satisfaction. "Are you all right?" I asked, scanning the room for signs of intrusion. "Perfectly fine, dear. Though I suspect Robert is having a rather unpleasant morning." She gestured toward her walk-in closet, where muffled sounds of struggle were emerging from behind the closed door. "I caught him going through my jewelry, looking for Princess's collar. Apparently, he thought killing her might be easier if he could make it look like a burglary gone wrong." I stared at Eleanor, then at the closet door, processing what she was telling me. "You trapped Robert in your closet?" The lock is automatic when engaged from the outside, a security feature Charles installed years ago when we started keeping valuable jewelry in there. Eleanor's smile was sharp as winter steel. "Robert triggered the upstairs alarm when he broke the lock on my jewelry case, but he had no idea I was watching him from my security monitor." The sounds from the closet grew more frantic. Robert had clearly realized he was trapped and was attempting to force the door. Eleanor watched the door rattle with the detached interest of someone observing a rather unsatisfying zoo exhibit. "How long has he been in there?" "About 20 minutes. Long enough to realize that his plan to murder Princess and steal enough jewelry to make it look like a random break-in wasn't quite as clever as he thought." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Eleanor had apparently called them before Robert even realized he was trapped, turning his attempted break-in into a perfectly documented case of attempted burglary and attempted murder. "The jewelry case he broke contains Princess's diamond collar, the one Charles gave me for our 50th anniversary that I had resized for her. It's worth about $30,000. Eleanor's voice was conversational, as if she were discussing the weather. "I suspect Robert planned to strangle Princess with it, then leave it beside her body to make it look like she'd been killed by thieves who didn't realize how valuable it was." The cold calculation behind Robert's plan made my stomach turn. Unlike Marcus's desperate attempt to save his daughter, Robert's scheme had been pure malice, killing Princess not even for direct financial gain, but simply to remove her as competition for Eleanor's inheritance. "Mrs. Whitmore, how did you know he was coming?" Eleanor's smile grew sharper. "Jennifer warned me that Robert was planning something, but I also had some help from an unexpected source. Marcus called yesterday to warn me that Robert had been asking detailed questions about the house's security system and Princess's daily routines." The police arrived with enough fanfare to satisfy Eleanor's sense of justice. Robert was extracted from the closet, disheveled, furious, and caught literally red-handed with Eleanor's broken jewelry case and Princess's diamond collar clutched in his fist. The evidence was overwhelming. Breaking and entering, attempted burglary, and based on the small plastic bag of rat poison found in his jacket pocket, attempted animal cruelty with intent to kill. As Robert was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Eleanor with pure hatred. "That cat doesn't deserve millions while family members struggle to pay bills." Eleanor's response was delivered with the dignity of someone who'd spent 92 years learning when to be gracious and when to be ruthless. Family members who are willing to commit murder for money don't deserve anything at all. After the police finished taking statements, Eleanor and I sat in the garden where Princess was still under security protection, both of us processing what had just happened. The cat in question seemed remarkably unconcerned about being the target of a murder plot, focusing instead on stalking a particularly interesting leaf that had fallen from an oak tree. 2 attempts on Princess's life in 1 week, I said, trying to wrap my mind around the surreal reality of our situation. This inheritance has brought out the worst in your entire family. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, watching Princess pounce on the leaf with typical feline enthusiasm. Maria, I need to tell you something about the will, something I haven't shared with anyone, including Mr. Patterson. My heart sank. After everything we'd been through, was Eleanor having second thoughts about leaving money to Princess? The will that Mr. Patterson filed isn't the only one I've had prepared. Eleanor's voice was steady, but I could hear an undercurrent of something that might have been regret. There's a second will, updated just last week, that addresses what would happen if something were to happen to Princess before she could inherit. What does it say? Eleanor's smile was sad but determined. If Princess dies before I do, her entire inheritance goes to you. Not to family members who tried to kill her. Not to charities that never knew her, to the person who protected her when she needed protection most. The words hit me like a thunderbolt. Eleanor had anticipated that family members might try to harm Princess, and she'd created a failsafe that would ensure her cats would-be killers gain nothing from their crimes. Mrs. Whitmore, I can't. You can, and you will, Eleanor interrupted firmly. Because if something happens to Princess, you'll be the one who tried to save her. The money will be small compensation for losing someone we both love, but at least it will ensure that greed doesn't win. I looked at Princess, who had successfully conquered the leaf and was now grooming herself with smug satisfaction. Does this mean the attempts on her life will continue? Eleanor's expression hardened. Not if I have anything to say about it. Robert's arrest will send a clear message to any other family members who might be considering similar actions. And I've made some additional arrangements that should provide Princess with long-term protection. What kind of arrangements? Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, expensive cardstock with elegant lettering that read, Hamilton, Associates, Personal Security and Protection Services. Princess now has a full-time bodyguard, Eleanor said, matter-of-factly. Someone who'll live here in the house, provide round-the-clock protection, and ensure that she remains safe regardless of what family members might be planning. I stared at the card, trying to process the fact that Eleanor had hired a professional bodyguard for a cat. How much is this going to cost? Less than Princess will inherit, and infinitely less than her life is worth to me. Eleanor's voice carried absolute finality. Mr. Hamilton assures me that his services include not just physical protection, but background investigations into anyone who shows unusual interest in Princess's welfare. That evening, we met Princess's new bodyguard, a surprisingly soft-spoken woman in her 30s named Sarah Chen, who had extensive experience protecting high-value targets in dangerous situations. She moved through the mansion with professional efficiency, identifying security, vulnerabilities, and establishing protocols for Princess's daily care that would minimize her exposure to potential threats. The average lifespan for a Persian cat is 12 to 17 years, Sarah explained as she watched Princess investigate a new hiding spot under Eleanor's piano. Princess is currently 8, which means we're potentially looking at providing protection services for nearly a decade. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Whatever it takes, Princess has already survived 2 murder attempts this week. I want to ensure there isn't a third. As I watched Sarah install additional security cameras and motion sensors throughout the house, I realized that Princess's inheritance had fundamentally changed all our lives. Eleanor's decision to leave money to her beloved cat had exposed the worst impulses of her human family members, but it had also revealed the lengths to which people would go to protect innocence from greed. 2 weeks later, Marcus visited the house for the first time since his confession. Sarah had approved the visit after conducting a background check that revealed his genuine efforts to rebuild his relationship with his daughter and atone for his near-catastrophic moral failure. He found Eleanor and me in the sitting room, with Princess curled contentedly in Eleanor's lap. while Sarah maintained her discreet, watchful presence from across the room. Marcus looked 10 years older than he had during his desperate visit, but there was something lighter in his expression. The burden of desperation had been replaced by what looked like genuine peace. "How is Sarah?" Eleanor asked, her voice carefully neutral. Marcus's face lit up with the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. "The treatment is working better than anyone expected. Her latest tests show significant improvement, and the doctors are cautiously optimistic about her long-term prognosis." "I'm glad to hear it. Eleanor, I came to thank you not just for the money, but for stopping me from becoming someone I couldn't have lived with." Marcus looked at Princess with something approaching reverence. "I was prepared to murder an innocent creature to save my daughter. If you hadn't forced me to confront what that actually meant, you would have found another way," Eleanor said gently. "Desperation makes people consider terrible options, but most fundamentally decent people can't follow through with truly evil acts." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching Princess sleep peacefully in Eleanor's lap. "I keep thinking about how Princess reached out to me, even after she somehow sensed I was a threat. Animals forgive in ways humans never could. Have you forgiven yourself?" The question seemed to hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I'm working on it. Therapy helps, and watching Sarah get better makes everything feel less impossible. But knowing how close I came to destroying something innocent for money." He shook his head. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself for that." Eleanor studied her nephew with the sharp intelligence that had served her well through 9 decades of reading people's character. "Marcus, I want to offer you something, not money, but something potentially more valuable." "What?" "A chance to earn your way back into this family's good graces. Princess needs regular veterinary care, socialization with people she can trust, and someone who understands the value of what she represents. Would you be interested in serving as one of her caretakers?" Marcus stared at Eleanor in shock. "You want me to help take care of Princess? After what I tried to do to her? I want you to have the opportunity to make amends by protecting something precious instead of destroying it." Eleanor's voice carried the authority of someone making a final offer. "The pay would be modest, but it would give you a chance to prove to yourself and to Princess that you're the man you want to be rather than the man you almost became." The offer hung in the air between them like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Marcus looked at Princess, then at Eleanor, then back at Princess with an expression that held equal parts hope and terror. Would she even let me near her after what I planned? As if summoned by his question, Princess stirred in Eleanor's lap, opened her green eyes, and looked directly at Marcus. For a long moment, cat and human regarded each other across the vast gulf of what had almost happened between them. Then Princess stood, stretched with typical feline grace, and jumped down from Eleanor's lap. She walked across the room to where Marcus sat frozen in his chair, sniffed his outstretched hand, and began to purr. Marcus burst into tears. "She forgives me," he whispered, his voice breaking as Princess rubbed against his legs with the same trusting affection she'd always shown him. "After everything, she still trusts me." Eleanor's smile held profound satisfaction. "Animals judge us by who we are right now, not by who we were in our worst moments. Princess knows you're not the same man who came here with those pills." As I watched Marcus gently scratch Princess behind the ears while tears of relief streamed down his face, I realized that Eleanor's inheritance plan had accomplished something far more complex than simply protecting a beloved pet. It had created a test that revealed people's true character, and for those who failed the test, it had also provided a path toward redemption. 6 months later, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. Princess curled beside her, as always. The will reading revealed the full scope of Eleanor's planning. Princess inherited $6 million in a trust fund managed by a team of lawyers and veterinarians who would ensure her comfort for life. I inherited $4 million. And the house, along with the responsibility of serving as Princess's primary guardian. Marcus inherited $1 million and a formal apology from Eleanor for underestimating his capacity for redemption. The remaining $1 million was divided among various animal rescue organizations, with a special endowment for research into treating childhood cancer, Eleanor's final gesture of support for Marcus's daughter. Robert and the other family members who had challenged Eleanor's competency received exactly what they had earned: nothing. The day after the will reading, I found myself sitting in Eleanor's favorite chair, with Princess in my lap, both of us adjusting to the reality of our new circumstances. The house felt empty without Eleanor's presence, but Princess seemed to understand that I was now her primary protector and companion. Sarah had remained as Princess's bodyguard, now funded by the trust fund rather than Eleanor's personal expenses, and Marcus visited twice a week to help with Princess's care and continue his journey toward redemption. The arrangement worked better than anyone had expected. Marcus had thrown himself into learning everything about feline health and behavior, transforming his guilt into expertise that genuinely benefited Princess's well-being. "She's happy," Marcus observed during one of his visits, watching Princess bask in a patch of autumn sunlight streaming through the library windows. "Eleanor would be pleased to see how well she's adjusting." I nodded, stroking Princess's silver fur as she purred contentedly. I think Eleanor knew Princess would be fine. She planned for every possible contingency except the one she was most afraid of, that people would value money more than love. But we proved her wrong, didn't we? Marcus's voice held a note of pride. In the end, love won. I looked around the room that had been the center of so much drama and conflict, now peaceful again, with afternoon light dancing across mahogany furniture and leather-bound books. Princess stretched and resettled herself more comfortably in my lap, utterly secure in her knowledge that she was protected and cherished. Yes, I agreed, thinking of Eleanor's final gift, not just the inheritance, but the way she'd used it to reveal and ultimately transform the people around her. In the end, love won. Princess purred louder, as if she understood perfectly that she was now not just a beloved pet, but the living symbol of Eleanor's faith in the power of unconditional love to triumph over greed, desperation, and the worst impulses of human nature. $6 million couldn't buy happiness, but it could certainly protect the innocent creature who had brought so much joy to the woman who loved her. And in the end, that was exactly what Eleanor had intended all along.